Hi, welcome to my August reading wrap-up. Here are the books I read in August. The first book I'm going to discuss is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This book has an amazing reputation. It's described as a campus novel, an inverted detective story with many references to literature and philosophy. What's not to like? It's about an elite group of students who study ancient Greek, and they're all very smart and mysterious and stuff. Right from the beginning, we find out that the narrator is partly responsible for the murder of one of the members of this group. This book has the unreliable narrator, the suspense, the intertextuality, the snobbish characters, sex, drugs, ancient rituals, right? Every time I read something, I want to enjoy it. I want to see the author as some sort of prophet. Unfortunately, I couldn't do it with this book. It was too long for its own good, and the plot was predictable, at least for me. If the first part of the book was more or less readable, the second one was just useless. The characters are one-dimensional. When readers praise them, it's usually because they aren't good or bad, and because they have something to hide, so they're mysterious. Really, that's the standard we have for complex characters? I felt like the author established them and then she didn't know what to do with them. The relationships between them are shallow. Although they can talk, they cannot communicate. Most of them are so self-absorbed that they cannot get out of their privileged bubbles. For a book that focuses on students of ancient Greek, it lacks the love for ancient Greece. I saw the studying part, but the love part isn't there. For a book with so much smoking, drinking, and mystery, it was so boring, at least for me. And I am a resilient reader. Half of the time, it feels like the characters have nothing to do. The intellectual dialogues between them lack substance. I've noticed this trend with contemporary writers. They want to prove that they are smart. Who is it for? People who like vibes rather than ideas. And I'm not saying one is better or worse than the other. Also younger people who like rituals, secret societies, and so on. By the way, if you want to prove me wrong, if you love this book, feel free to share the reasons in the comments. I'd love to hear another perspective. Another bestseller I didn't enjoy is Zuleikha by Guzel Yakhina. The novel tries to be the war and peace, the Gone with the Wind of the 21st century. Strong female character in a horrible environment. That's the dream. Zuleikha lives in a small village in the Soviet Union with her husband and her mother-in-law. As part of the Eat the Rich campaign, something happens to her husband and she is sent into exile in Siberia. I felt like the author was desperately trying to manipulate me, to make me pity the main character. The title alludes to some sort of awakening, like in Kate Chopin's novel. But really, the protagonist isn't this well-rounded female character, and she doesn't change that much throughout the book. First, she is a slave to her husband and her mother-in-law, and then the Soviets take her, and she's a sort of slave to them. Poor Zuleikha, poor Zuleikha. This book is trying to be a historical fiction, but there's so many moments that are terribly, terribly inaccurate, and it's like an anti-Soviet propaganda. You don't need to lie to be anti-Soviet, you know? Like, the USSR has done so many wrong things, and you have chosen to present fiction instead, but the historical inaccuracy isn't the worst thing here. The worst thing is the style. The language is too flowery, and if you hate poetry in prose, bad poetry in prose, avoid this book like the plague. I felt like this was written by a 16-year-old fan of Solzhenitsyn. Not like there's anything wrong with this, but on top of that, I felt like the author was suffering from graphomania. You will enjoy this book if you like soap operas about the female lead who is a victim of society and evolves from this horrible environment, like Sansa Stark saying that she's glad she was raped because she's not a little bird anymore. Yeah, kind of like that. The Color Purple by Alice Walker. This is an epistolary novel where most characters have to go through so much pain to survive, from sexual abuse to racial oppression and everything in between. The main character writes these letters to God and then to her sister because writing is the only way she can express herself. The writing style is unusual, at least for me, but after a while I got used to it. The first few pages are really disturbing and brutal, and I wouldn't recommend this book to younger people or to people who are recovering from a traumatic experience. If you don't like reading about the truths of our past and present social issues, you will not enjoy this novel. The emotionally challenging parts were hard to read for obvious reasons. This book is powerful and it affects you whether you like it or not. The characters are real and their relationships are authentic, though some of them are toxic. The strong female characters don't act like superheroes, except Sophia. She's badass. The ending was a bit surprising considering the rest of the book, but I can't say I didn't enjoy it. If you like the phrase show, don't tell when it comes to books, you might enjoy The Color Purple. It's so much more than a lecture on systemic injustice. The White Dove of Cordoba by Dina Rubina. I'm not sure you can find this book in English, so I won't go into detail about it. The protagonist is this genius artist who forges the masterpieces of famous artists instead of painting his own works. The author's style is very good, but after 200 pages, it becomes too much. Switching between different time periods was the most confusing element of the book. There are many coincidences, unusual dreams for the main character, and true love for visual art. You can see that the author is very knowledgeable in this respect. She goes into great detail about the restoration process of old paintings and about the different techniques that artists use. Unfortunately, the book isn't as captivating as it might seem at first. Next book is a memoir. It's called Geisha Alive, and it's written by one of the most popular geishas or geckos ever. I don't know much about geishas. I only watched a few documentaries, but that's it. I wanted to learn about this from the queen herself, Mineko. And I've heard that the portrayal of geishas in different movies and books is just wrong. This should be an accurate portrayal of them. I expected this to be about the life of an artist. I expected this to explain me how geishas can make anyone feel loved and respected. I wanted to know about the psychology behind this. What did I get instead? You see, I'm not the biggest fan of memoirs. They can be historically accurate, but most of the time, authors can't help themselves from distorting the truth, so they can come across as saints, and everyone else is to blame for everything that went wrong. The same goes for Mineko, unfortunately. To illustrate, I'll retell you an episode. She's at the doctor's office, and the doctor asks her if she farted, and she replies with, "Excuse me, I don't do things like that." She seems so unlikable for some reason. She thinks that she's better than others, and it can become annoying after a while. You can also tell that she's not a real writer. She tries to use flowery language, but for some reason it seems fake. Sometimes she describes an event as something very important, but then she doesn't describe the consequences. At times, it feels like you're reading anecdotes without any connection between them. Sophia Tolstoy's Who's to Blame or Whose Fault? Leo Tolstoy's wife wrote this as a response to his Kreutzer Sonata, so the novella is very intimate. It's about marriage and jealousy. A young girl falls in love with an older man. It explores the female sexuality without going too far. It reflects the complex relationship she had with her husband and her wifely duties. If in Leo's work the wife is just a wife, for Sophia the wife is the main character, and she has a name, not just the function. Her protagonist reflects on the world around her, but she also sacrifices everything for her husband and children. Her husband views her as an accessory to his life, and he uses her as he pleases. And surprise, she is dissatisfied with her life. I didn't spoil anything, just saying. Next book is Possession. I know that this is a question of taste, but this book was so boring. The writing is flabby, but it was the mixture of cliches and pretentiousness that annoyed me the most. The first chapters are somewhat intriguing. There's this researcher who idolizes a Victorian poet, and one day he finds 2 drafts of this poet's letter to an unnamed woman. Who was this woman if she definitely wasn't the poet's wife? The discovery would change everything. It's extremely valuable. 2 stories, parallel plot lines, blah blah blah, metafiction. They say that Possession is an exhilarating novel of wit and romance, an intellectual mystery, and a triumphant love story. Is this what people call triumphant, really? The parts that were okay were overshadowed by the ones I hated. If there's a universe where I have to edit the book, I would have to cut out half of it. I got to the end of Possession only because I wanted it to be worth the time I wasted on it. After 500 and something pages, I couldn't care less about the twist at the end. Let's say that I'll never read Byatt again. Look at me spreading negativity. I know that many people love this book. I know that it criticizes some critical approaches to literature and academia as a whole, that it alludes to certain poets and mythology and so on. Just because the wrapping paper is beautiful doesn't mean I'll appreciate the gift. The Sea is about a playwright-director who decides to write his memoirs. He encounters his first love and begins to idealize their past together. He is so self-centered that he sees her as an attribute to his life, not as an actual human being. He's obviously an unreliable narrator, and spending so much time with him was actually frustrating. The story is very sad and empty, and I don't see any reason to go into detail about it. The writing is beautiful, the plot is unusual, but it wasn't for me. I liked James and the description of some meals, but that's it. Next book is Their Eyes Were Watching God. Jenny Crawford recounts her life to an old friend. Both Jenny and her mother were conceived in rape, so to protect her, her grandmother marries her off to an older man. This is a coming-of-age story about a woman who strives for independence and who doesn't let her past define her. She is not satisfied with the way that society defines women of color. Her relationships reveal different aspects of her personality and help her in her search for identity. She learns to accept herself. She doesn't want to be the obedient wife, the angel of the house. She wants a true partnership. I appreciated the character development and most of the plot, but to tell you the truth, I didn't love this book. It's an enjoyable read for most people. It's nicely structured, and it has everything that you look for in a classic. The next book, The Gadfly, is an adventure story in the midst of the Italian unification. It's about revolution, religion, and radical ideas. It has the romantic hero, the beautiful Italian landscapes, and the never-ending generation war. 19-year-old Arthur Burton lives in Pisa with his half-brothers. He idolizes his confessor Lorenzo Montanelli and tells him that he will fight for the freedom of Italy with his comrades. Gemma, his childhood friend and sweetheart, is also part of this organization. Soon, Arthur is arrested, but he refuses to betray his comrades. He is released after a while, but he soon learns that the party blames him for the arrest of one of its members. And this is just the beginning. If you like The Count of Monte Cristo, you will enjoy this novel. It was also very popular in the USSR, and if you decide to read this, you'll understand why. It has a movie adaptation and Shostakovich wrote its score. It's an easy read, it's entertaining, and yes, melodramatic at times. It has many plot twists. I'm not going to give you any examples, obviously. If you're offended by leftist ideas, misrepresentations of priests, and atheism, don't read this book. The Love and Short Trilogy by Salma Lagerlöf. She was the first woman to receive the Nobel Prize in Literature, but she's not well known outside Sweden. These 3 novels are simple but engaging. The first part is The Löwenskjöld Ring. It's a gothic tale, a ghost story, but it doesn't have the horror elements in it, so it's okay for children too. It's a fairy tale about the curse of the ring, which was given to General Löwenskjöld by the king. It was stolen from the general's tomb, and all the owners of the ring suffer the consequences. Even though some of them are honorable people, they can't escape the curse of the ring. The story is very straightforward, so it's not a challenging read even if you're unfamiliar with the genre. It's the kind of story that should be told by the fireplace in a cold winter night. The second part, Charlotte Löwenskjöld, has more psychological realism in it. I liked it more than the first part, and you can read it separately if you want. It's more character-driven than the previous one, and the characters are amazing. Charlotte is in love with Carl Arthur. They've been engaged for 5 years, but evil forces are at play, and thank God. Charlotte loves him so much that she's ready to sacrifice her reputation for his sake. But at the same time, both her and her future mother-in-law are very cunning. Some episodes depicted here are extremely relatable. Imagine going somewhere far away to get to know your future parents-in-law. The atmosphere in the carriage is awful and you're so tired that you start to think, is my fiancé worth it? Moments like this are priceless, especially considering the fact that Carl Arthur is such a stupid hypocrite. Anyways, the third book, Anna Svart, is mostly about the struggle to find fulfillment in life. I can't say more without spoiling the second book, and I like the second book the most. So these were the books I read in August. If you have any opinions, share them in the comments. Thanks for watching. Bye!